All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Rich with TMC, and I want to thank you all for spending some time with us this afternoon for the second installment of a weekly series that we're doing in and around strategies and safeties for a phased return of employees to the office. Certainly a topic that is top of mind with many of our members. As a situation with the pandemic continues to evolve better depending on what part of the country you're in, obviously a little variability there. So this is part of our TMC Connect platform through which we run lots of Zoom. Still don't know what the right term is. Is this a Zoom call, a Zoom? Anybody, what is this? A Zoom?
You're Zooming.
We're Zooming?
Zooming.
I don't know what to call them, but whatever it is, we're doing it, and we do a lot of them, and it's all based upon what you guys are telling us you want to hear about, and you can rest assured that will continue to be the case with our virtual platform. A couple of other platforms that we have for our members, ask-tmc.com, our lender member dedicated message board, and TMC Benchmark, which actually closes today. The submission period is open from the 5th to the 19th of every month. And then on my to-do list for the next couple of days will be to start analyzing the data, to pen the executive summary, and then to get dashboards out to our members. If you're not participating in TMC Benchmark, the only question would be why. It's free as part of membership, and it is a very valuable tool. So if you need more info, you can reach out to me or your member benefits advocate, and we can get you guys signed up. So lucky to once again have legitimately two of my favorite people in the industry with me to help talk about the very timely topic of returning to the office, how to do it safely and when. Jody Hall, the president of Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, and Mike Metz, the operations manager of VIP Mortgage. And why don't Jody and Mike, you guys just tell the listeners a little bit about your company and yourself, and then we'll go ahead and get into the conversation. And Jody, we'll start with you.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Rich, for the introduction. I'm assuming you say that on every call that you do, whoever is hosting with you. So welcome to the call today. I'm the president of Nationwide Mortgage Bankers. I think the biggest point is to kind of explain who Nationwide Mortgage Bankers is and where we are located, because it'll make the rest of the conversation a little bit easier as we talk about the planning. So Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, although we're licensed in 42 states, are headquarters and 170 of our near 400 employees are in Melville, New York on Long Island. That has been obviously it's been a hotspot for COVID-19. As soon as we went remote on 100% remote on March the 16th, we started planning for the return, having a large sales presence in that office and knowing that loan officers would soon be the first to request to come back into that location. And then, we have branches and ops centers across the United States, but that was our primary concern, was the headquarters, just because of the large concentration of employees and also because of because of it being a hot spot. And many of our employees, some of our employees have second jobs that work for either our volunteer firemen or EMS drivers. And we also have a lot of our employees' spouses and family who commute into the city, who work as firemen, police officers, first responders, or are on Long Island in those capacities where the police precincts were very heavily hit, and we had employees, spouses who were impacted as well. So that gives you a little bit of the demographics. And the approach that we went through in making decisions on safely returning to work and starting a phased return yesterday. And I told Rich last week, he had asked if we would lead this after last week's discussion, if I would jump in with Mike again this Tuesday and next Tuesday. And I told him it depended on how Monday went. We did have a successful return to the Melville headquarters, 30% of our employees spread out over 55,000 square feet. I couldn't have done that. And all of this planning has not been just my planning, even though I'm the one that's talking about it. But the founder of the company, Richard Steinberg, was very adamant about having a safe return, keeping our community safe, keeping our employees safe, and helping prevent a resurgence of the coronavirus. And then, our chief operating officer, our head of HR, our head of security, our chief of staff all played a very big part in the planning and also the execution yesterday and a successful return. So with that, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
I'm Mike Metz, the operation manager here at VIP. I always feel fortunate when I hear Jody talk because we got the easy one on this round. We did not nearly have as high a penetration of the coronavirus into Arizona, and especially now that we're into the summer, our biggest concern is when it gets over 100, people want to sit by the pool and drink Corona. We don't want them bringing it into the office. So we've had to plan carefully to try to bring people back in. We are starting on a volunteer-only basis, and we did start that yesterday. I am in the office, which you probably can't tell, but just pretend. And we've had about probably 10 to 15% of our population our office population start volunteering to come in so far.
Awesome. Jody, Mike, thank you for the background. We'll help frame the discussion, and let's get into it. We're going to talk about really three different aspects to return to the office: planning and everything that goes into that. I think that's where the majority of our members are at right now, either in the planning phase or thinking about entering that phase, creating a vision, and then the action plan. So we'll go through those one at a time. But starting the conversation with where the majority of mortgage lenders, and quite frankly, many businesses across America is the plan. All right, everybody was forced remote in mid-March. People like remote. It's gone better than people think. Your productivity's been good. We've talked about, is that just because, it's busy and people are elated to be employed and they want to work from home, so they're showing off their productivity skills? But it's complicating the decision somewhat as lenders assess the costs of brick and mortar and everything else that goes into physical buildings. So, Joni, I'm going to start with you because you guys were about as far out in front of this as anybody I talked to. I mean, really the second that people went remote, you guys started planning for the return, correct?
Yeah, I actually looked back since the last time that we talked, and the week after we went remote, we started talking about what a return looked like. And, and we've also had the question like, well, if everything's working so well remote, why come back? Why allow people to come back? And I get a lot of energy off of the floor and having employees in the office, and many of our sales people were reluctant to leave the office in New York when we did go remote. So we wanted to make sure that we gave our employees an opportunity to safely work in an environment that was most conducive to them being productive. So we almost immediately started planning the return, looking towards our building management. RXR is our building management. They have been highlighted on CNN and Fox News for what they have been doing and preparing to return, working with them, following state and local guidance. and even having to tweak based on what our local guidance was in New York. Most recently, we have extended stay-at-home orders, although we are considered essential. We've had extended stay-at-home orders through June the 13th in New York. So our phased approach is that we'll have the individuals that started back yesterday. We won't do another phase of additional individuals until June the 15th, which is that Monday following what we hope will be the lifting of the state stay-at-home orders. But we just, we felt that it was important to, as quickly and safely as possible, get in front of that. And, it's a test that you can't study too hard for. It is definitely, I talked last week about, I really felt a sense of burden in making, you don't want to make the wrong decision, and you don't want to not have enough precautions in place, and not only put your employees in harm's way, but potentially put their families and their communities in harm's way. So the planning was important. Having documented every step-by-step definitely was able to help our employees feel confident that we had a plan, and communicating that plan to them helped them feel safe so that they could come back and work in the environment that they feel that they are most productive. So again, you can't plan enough, you can't plan far enough ahead of it, and you got to have your plans in place for every what if scenario that may happen throughout the process, and be flexible through it.
Thanks, Jody. And I want to touch a little bit more on the whole engagement with your employees on the decision making and timing. We'll get to that in a second. Mike, we intentionally picked two panelists for this session. One with the company based in New York, kind of the extreme at one end. You guys have been fortunate not to be as affected. Also, more of your staff was remote than most of our members, so was less of an adjustment. So talk to me about, when your planning started, what some of the first steps were, and where you're at with it right now.
Good questions. So for us, kind of the first steps were trying to figure out what scope we were going to be dealing with as soon as we started sending people home. And as you mentioned, we were fortunate enough that we had a large number of our employees already working from home to start. We started trying to see how many were going to want to try to come back right away versus eventually, and what the feelings were. So we did some surveys pretty early on, both with kind of traditional Survey Monkey type reach outs, but then I'd also highly suggest reaching out to people and having dialogues, and with a few different departments and a few different personality types. Most of you can probably think off the top of your head of a few different of the personality types within your organization: the super laid back person, the nervous Nelly, the person who just wants to get work done. Reach out to a few of them and find out what they're thinking about and what their concerns are. And that was really instrumental for us in trying to then start planning on what timelines do we need to look at and what resources do we need to start really investigating. One common theme that we found across the board when we were talking to people is there was a big concern about, well, is the location going to be safe? And part of the tricky part in researching all this is the research is not necessarily consistent. You will see some guidelines that seem to be pretty steady about how long the coronavirus will remain in a location on different service types, but beyond that, it can be more difficult. So that's where we had to, one, I'd suggest reaching out to your human resources and your health insurance company. They will have lots of information that they've probably already provided to other clients with guidance on assistance in generating a policy for phasing people back into the office and what you should do before bringing them back in. And like I mentioned, cleanliness of the office was a huge concern for many, not just within our corporate, but we opened up other branches as well. And on one of them, we had one person go back in, but when I reached out to a few of the others, they're like, oh, I want to go back in, but it hasn't been deep cleaned and disinfected yet. It's like, all right, well, let's definitely make sure that's taken care of at the branch level. I'm surprised the branch manager didn't already do that, but you have to have those conversations and verify 2-3 times, find out what those sticking points are and what makes people feel safe to start coming back into the office. Because it's going to be kind of two factors. One, do they want to start heading back into the office, or do they like not having the commute for now? And two, do they feel safe going back into the office? And then from there, you can start backing into what steps do I need to go into to provide a safe location for them to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Jody, it's one thing to say, oh, we're engaging with our employees and involving them in the decision making. It's another thing to actually mean it and to actually do it correctly. How have you guys involved your employees in the decision making process here related to a return to the office?
Yeah, I think, we did go through a few weeks of planning, making sure that we were letting employees know what were going to be the guidelines coming in so that they did feel safe. Once we had established what our cleaning routine was going to be, what the building was going to require, we surveyed our employees and, we asked them things like, how productive do you feel at home? In knowing, and this is after not only communicating what our cleaning and return to work requirements were going to be for each location, we made sure that we asked them, how safe do you feel returning? So we communicated both in writing several times. We had video calls allowing them to ask questions about, with each of the departments and even company-wide, about, what the plan was, what type of cleaning were we doing? And then we polled them about how safe did they feel returning to work? Did they feel that they wanted to be in the office 100% of the time? What days of the week did they want to be in the office? We asked them for feedback if there was anything that we missed, in what we felt a safe return to work looked like. And, our employee, we're fortunate, and I feel like we get very candid feedback regardless of what the topic is. So the culture set it up nicely to, I believe, get very candid feedback from our employees. We did not make it mandatory for anyone to return, and we really made sure that people felt as though that wasn't going to compromise our beliefs or thought of them. And they were very forthcoming with information and what they, we made sure that if we could, we would incorporate what their requests were as well.
Thanks, Jody. Mike, you mentioned taking the feedback from your staff and having it back into your plan. Just curious, what was the feedback from your staff in general?
So we found most people, I was, in my case, super particularly concerned about the spacing and the flow through the office and all those kinds of resources. And when we started talking to people, while that was still a concern, it was, as I mentioned, some of the biggest factors were going to be, is it safe to do that? How many people are going to be in my area? Kind of that proximity towards the next people, which was thankfully something we had already vetted and measured between the desks. And when we emailed out to survey who would like to start coming into the office, I just kept a spreadsheet on my side that had the locations of those employees. And then anytime we had more than one employee within a area of an office, would email out to them individually and say, here's the people who would still be near you. They would still be more than 6 feet apart, but within the same proximity. Are you comfortable with that? Or would you like to be relocated? And that took care of the main concern most of them had. And just knowing they had that option, most people ended up not exercising it, but they were glad that we were doing that, thinking through of the process. And then, like I mentioned, the deep clean. The big thing is, and Jody kind of touched upon this, communicate the things you've done, because it's one thing to do them, but if you don't communicate them to the people, they don't realize. So like letting them know we specifically had the air tested and looked at the ventilation rates, and we did the deep clean and we did the scrub and the carpet cleaning, and we had, the surfaces disinfected. Share those bits with people, because then it kind of gives them the peace of mind they need to know that they're going to a safe place to work.
Thanks, Mike. Jody, just a lot of different conversations I've had with members, people are really rethinking just physical space, all the things that we do as mortgage lenders to cut costs, and some things I think we overlook that are huge expenses that, are not, shaving a basis point here or efficiency here. Have you done like a review of like the commercial space that the company has on lease, and how are you looking at that? And Mike, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one too after Jody.
Yeah, absolutely. We quickly, when we saw going remote, I've always, we have quite a few people that were previously remote, but we had some ops staff that did come in and, I've always been, a proponent of ops staff being remote. I think they, can keep their head down and they can work well. But wasn't necessarily what happened with Nationwide. And as we went remote and we saw that the production not only stayed the same but improved for the numbers from operations staff, it was almost within a couple of days, it's like, wow, we really don't need 55,000 square feet. So we actually started then also looking at our leases for even branches and seeing like, is this space needed, and looking when as leases are expiring, either renegotiating or consolidating to branches to decrease the overhead because it's not necessary. And then from your operations staff already talking about the reduction of square footage needed from a corporate perspective because everyone did do well. And what does that mean? Does that mean that you get to use that spend to compensate your employees a different way? But it is definitely in the forefront of our minds. It's not the new normal, because I don't think there is a normal, but it definitely is causing each department to think about the way in which we all work and what the necessity is, and with the technology that it's available, it is if we are face to face a lot of the time. You have those 15 minutes between meetings that you lose the energy from individuals, but it definitely is going to change our physical square footage in branches.
Thanks, Jody. Mike, I'd love to hear how you're looking at just leased space that VIP leases or owns. And then you also mentioned just floor spacing in general and kind of reconfiguring things. Would be interested, experiences, thoughts there for the return.
So we have not thought about completely terminating any spaces yet. Kind of ties into that discussion of, do you leave people working from home 100%? And we've been fortunate enough, like you mentioned, that we have had remote employees for quite a while. And what we've learned is that if people are 100% remote 100% of the time, they eventually start to go stir crazy. And you kind of get this disconnect from the culture. Jody mentioned you get an energy from being on the floor, and we feel that that is very true. And you do hear people talking in the background on the phone about an issue that you forgot about, or talking about files, and kind of reinforcing those little small sentences that reinforce your culture. And those are important. So we've always been in favor of kind of a rotation or a staggered workforce of, okay, you can work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then each week you can alternate whether it's Monday or Friday, those types of situations that you work out. So with our offices, we are looking at the space some of them have, because you do realize that some of them you don't need that much space, especially at some of the branch levels. Salespeople tend to not necessarily like being in their chairs. So they tend to not have use a lot of the space they already have. And then especially at the branch level, if you have people not needing to work all the time from the office, especially now, you can look at doing seat rotations and looking to decrease the space you are taking at some of those branch levels.
Thanks, Mike. Jody, how are you looking at, potential reconfigurations of the space? And I obviously know you're a Clevelander working for a company not in Cleveland, and just interested, like your executive team, how you're viewing that at Nationwide, if you need to be in home office as much, not as much, how are you looking at that?
Well, a couple of things from a seating perspective. One thing I forgot to mention is when you have 300 desks, you need to have them numbered. and have your floor plan on a whiteboard chart. It makes it very easy to then reconfigure when you're bringing back 30% of your staff to get everyone spread out, and also so that you can communicate before they get back to the office where they will be sitting so people aren't mingling around. So if any of you have large centers where you have a lot of employees, it's important that you let them know before they come back where they will be sitting, and that their items have been moved for them so that they aren't wandering around, and having the actual floor plan and being able to say, you know, this is your desk. It made it very easy to bring employees back. So I'll start there. As far as the executive, our executive team is across the United States. CFO is in Pennsylvania, Chief Technology Officer in Columbus. I'm in Cleveland. And Director of Credit Risk is also in Ohio. Our Director of Learning and Development is in Vegas. So we're all over the place. And so we're used to commuting. Most employees commute to that management director, executive level, commute at least 1 week a month. And then I commute every week typically. But as of right now, we are not traveling. So at least until that June 15th, we're not traveling. I will probably start, you know, I won't be going every week to New York. I'll limit that. But we communicate every morning via Teams meetings with all the executives, with all of the managers. We really haven't lost anything. If anything, we have gained higher communication because we've been forced to. So we don't really have a plan for returning to that. One of the things that I do miss is I love being out on the road and, you know, getting into existing branches, and that's just, it's not on the roadmap right now. So we're going to have to do that virtually for now. Everyone's understanding, but it's, you know, it's a matter of my preference, but we're perfect. We're running very well being remote, and we have no intentions of first making it mandatory for anyone to travel to the corporate office. And, you know, we're kind of playing it by ear to see if there's a resurgence and see how things play out through June the 15th.
Thanks, Jody. Mike, as VIP, a company that's, you know, really been early adopters and embracers of business intelligence technology and remote work, I'm just curious, like the shifts in the hours that your employees work. I came from the banking world, you know, where it was like 8:30 to 4:30, or, you know, and it was just no deviation from that, like, you know, to a fault. How are you handling that?
We have provided a lot more flexibility on that one for the work from home, and it's a combination of one, the position that people are working, and two, their personal lives, and we've seen a lot of success with that. For example, our funders tend to start very early in the morning, so we've had them request to start working 7 o'clock, even 6:30 in the morning, so that they can go through and start balancing CDs without people asking them questions every 3 seconds about when the CD is going to be balanced. And on the flip side, we have some departments where they've been switching to the other side, where they'll start working at 9 and work until later in the evening, like our disclosure desk, where they get the requests for an initial CD at 6 p.m. and want to still get it out that day. So we've found that with the working from home, allowing people some of that staggered flexibility, it actually has provided some convenience to the clients, whether that's the loan officer or the actual borrower, while still providing the same levels of productivity that has actually gone up versus, you know, a more mandated 8 to 5 type period. And we've so far liked that, and kind of going along with Jody's, she mentioned it earlier, forcing everyone into this situation has kind of required us to be more purpose driven in our communications. A lot of times communication can kind of just be automatic or isn't a focus, whereas right now it is a focus for a lot of people, and you have to be very deliberate about your communications. And it's almost ironically put people into tighter communication than we were before. And that's something we're hoping to keep going because it's been very effective.
Thanks, Mike. Recruiting and training is a topic that's been coming up with our members a lot lately, to the point where I think we added a session next week just exclusively related to virtual training of employees. A lot of lenders kind of grappling with it. We're also obviously heading into, it's busy as hell, and most people expect it's going to get even busier. So, you know, people are looking to position their operation to scale to more business potentially. So, you know, it's always looking to recruit salespeople, and everybody's, I think, right now looking for good ops people as well. What does recruiting and training look like for a company right now, Jed? I can't even think through that.
Well, everything became virtual overnight. We, from a training perspective, our training, we use the Adobe training suite. So most of our training had been remote already. Having our director of credit risk, who trains out LOS, does most of the loan officer, new loan officer training and the training to loan officers on new platforms, that was already remote. So we're used to having that virtual classroom and keeping people connected within that. So training didn't really change from what we were doing before. Recruiting definitely changed. You know, we would, if you're from recruiting from a branch perspective, if you're out recruiting branches, you know, the practice was always you had to bring them into the corporate office, and you had to, you know, you had to go out to a nice dinner and, you know, meet face to face for that cultural feel. And now we are, you know, we're seeing more recruiting going on via, you know, virtual through Teams or Zoom meetings, and you have to get that face-to-face, answer the same questions. I think it's probably more productive because there's less downtime when you bring a recruit into the office and you're going from department to department to department. Inevitably, somebody finishes before the next person's ready, so you have downtime. And now it's just like boom, boom, boom. You get it done. You have less time for people to travel. You have less expense from travel and hotels and all of that good stuff. So the recruiting has changed for us, but I would say that the training has not changed. The one training that has changed is we offer continuing education courses for realtors as a company, and the state of New York allowed us to do those virtually at first. The ones that we've had record-breaking numbers, not being even able to handle the number of people that are registering from a technology platform. And we have our first Zoom continuing education course this month in Ohio. So it's a brand new world that we live in. So it's interesting to not have that face-to-face, and you have the conversation. One of the loan officers is like, well, are we like going to be able to say something before the continuing education courses? And it's like, it's just like if we were face-to-face, of course, they're going to allow us to say something. So it has been interesting. So, you know, training across the board, we've been pushing our loan officers to get their continuing education in while this is their downtime, even though production is high as it's been, so we can prepare for that fall, hopefully buying frenzy and home purchase frenzy, and they have all their continuing education out of the way, but it's all virtual.
One of our members yesterday, I was dying with laughter, making the argument that steakhouse is more essential than like barbers, you know, like just lamenting for a steak dinner that it wasn't at home on the grill with his significant other. So Mike, and I guess it goes with that saying, feedback, questions. We've got 10, 12 minutes left here. Any questions that you guys have, your experiences, things you're thinking through as far as return to the office is concerned, please feel free to leave them in the chat or the Q&A. Mike, have you guys added any new operational employees these last couple months, or has it just been like nose to the grindstone, knock it out?
We have still added new employees. We've added, I think, 3 new underwriters. We've added another person on our disclosure desk, processor, and some sales support type positions. As we were discussing on a webinar yesterday with TMC, there's your plug. We are still forecasting this volume to continue for longer than we originally anticipated with no cliff. So at that point, it's okay, we've had the nose to the grindstone. Eventually, you still need people to have lives. It's great that they'll sit at home in their pajamas and work from 6 till 6, but that's not a good long-term solution. So we have done some hires in some departments. And we use a program suite called Litmos, Litmos. And if anyone wants to check that out, you can do one recorded videos. It makes it super easy to record those videos with your software for training purposes. And then you can include tests afterwards, and you can have learning paths. So everyone has to go through the compliance trainings for us. And then once they go through that, then they're assigned to an underwriter learning path, a processor learning path. And you can assign the modules within those specific paths. So maybe everyone goes through a Zoom training like Jody mentioned, an Encompass training, but well, all right, both underwriters and originators should go through the income piece. And then from there, once they get it, okay, now you get your credentials to do whatever.
Thanks, Mike. Jody, I saw you answered a question in the chat. We had somebody ask if you had anyone refuse or will refuse to return to work. How did you handle?
Yep. Yeah, we have, we've had those who have felt that it's not safe. Everyone that has returned, it has been optional. There's been no forcing anyone to return to the office. We continue to performance manage people accordingly, and it has nothing to do with if they are sitting at their home or they're sitting here. If the job's getting done, life goes on. So we have allowed employees, if they don't feel comfortable returning, we have asked them, please don't. You get one person who, puts fear into another person, and it just becomes a whirlwind. So we want people to make those decisions for themselves. And I quite honestly I wouldn't feel comfortable demanding anyone come back that doesn't feel comfortable, because I don't, God forbid something happens and they would become infected, or something would happen with taking something to their family. So.
Mm-hmm. Mike, obviously a best practice to document your plan to return to work so it's out there for everybody to see, spirit of transparency and good communication. We've talked to a few of our members that are trying to start to think through this, like, where do I even start in crafting a return to work policy or plan? Where did you start in putting yours together?
We had a template that they had provided to us. When I mentioned reaching out to your healthcare provider, chances are that they will have a template, and the kind folks at TMC will probably send out the template that we had sent that you can use as well. We did go through that one, and it forced you to think about a lot of angles, phases. We did start with the volunteer only as well, because like Jody mentioned, you don't want to poison the well with negativity or, well, actual sick people. So, we started off volunteer basis and first phase. When would the second phase? What does that look like? And started to really go through and document it in full. That said, most people are not going to get excited to read an 8-page long document about covering all the bases. So I would highly suggest having a half-page summarized version of what your action plan is, and maybe a few frequently asked questions. Because the important thing is that people understand the plan. So do the CYA and think through all the bases, but have a very short, concise version for people. We're going to do a partial volunteer only phase 1 on this date. Here's the guidelines. Here's what phase 2 date time may look like based off this, future plans to come.
Almost sounds like you were alluding to have like an ops staff version and a sales version. No, I'm just kidding.
That's a pretty good analogy there.
Jody, before the call started, before we went live, we were talking about the phases kind of changed based in New York on Cuomo's guidance, and also screening employees. If you could talk a little bit about those experiences.
Yeah, we found out, first of all, that stay-at-home orders were put in place in New York. We're going to be extended through June the 13th So our next phase to return will revolve around that and probably only go back to 50% of the employees. And again, it's going to still be on a volunteer basis. And that's assuming there are no changes. We are considered an essential business. So we could continue the return, but we really want to see how everything plays out. And, a lot of states have lifted stay-at-home orders or have had changes, and people are getting back out in the community. And I kind of want to see what's going to happen. Is there going to be a resurgence even quite possibly before June the 15th, because people aren't following, wearing masks in public, social distancing in public. So right now, that's our phase from the change in what the state has mandated. And then from a screening perspective, we had made the decision to offer our employees, because of the large concentration of COVID and the dynamics that I explained of the company, we had decided to make testing of current being positive for COVID currently a requirement to return to the office. So it's voluntary to have the test, but if you didn't have the test, we asked the employees that they didn't return. So those that returned were tested. They also had the choice, if they were not positive, to go into get the antibody test as well. So it was a service that we offered to all of our employees in the New York. And if they did test positive, they weren't allowed to enter the suite, so that we could protect the rest of our employees. And we will continue. Came up last week about the temperatures or no temperatures. Temperatures are required in New York every single day. We're also keeping a log of who is in the office. So God forbid, we do find out that someone is ill, that is affected by COVID. We want to know who was in the office, who did they have exposure to, so that we can get everybody safely back to their homes and wait out a 2-week period. But if you have a temperature and we've locked our side doors to make everyone come through the main entrance so that they can have temperatures. Our building is also taking temperatures on the main floor, but just in the event that someone does come by, we're taking temperatures just in New York. And if you have a temperature, you aren't permitted. You have to return to home for a minimum of 2 weeks to protect everyone.
Thanks, Jody. I have just a couple minutes left. If anybody has any final questions, this would be the time for it. Mike, who from your staff did you involve, I guess, in the execution and monitoring of your plan? Was it like department heads, processing underwriting? How deep did you go in terms of people that are helping you manage the process?
We went the opposite of processing and underwriting, because we figured that they were busy enough that they would just not even realize that we had lifted the quarantine. So we involved 1, our HR department. 2, we found that some of our customer service people and some of our department heads, like shipping, were down to help us in organizing this. And we had one person who was very okay talking and researching with local authorities to kind of see what updated guidance was. As the situation continues to evolve, it's important that if you write the plan, you still need to keep watching and see what the evolving climate is like, so that you can change the plan as needed and then help enact it. We have not had to go as robust as Jody has. She's got, preparations for Corona ninjas. We had to not, thankfully, go to those levels. So on our side, for example, we are not taking temperatures just because there has been very low rate here, and in our side, congregating people towards a location for that we saw as more risk than taking it. So it's just kind of involving everyone in those decisions, the people who are at the office, and making sure, again, everyone is feeling safe with that and then still following the guidance.
Thanks, Mike. Jody, we had another question come in. Who is taking the temperatures? Is it self-tests by the employee, human resources, security?
We have a director of security, and he's taking the temperatures. We do have, it's like the long distance thermometers to take the temperatures. So you don't have to be right on top, but we did provide all of the, we're 100% masked too in the suite. So I think that helps. But he is completely garbed with mask, has a shield, has gloves on, takes the temperatures. We don't record the temperatures, so just so everyone knows that it's in or out, we just check off that the person has entered the suite, which means that they had an okay temperature. And I will point out too, with other people reopening, I don't know if you saw with the return to Wall Street, they're taking temperatures on the trading floor. Also here locally, a local university that returned, their employees that are returning, they have to report that they took their temperature every day before they return as well. So just some, what other industries are doing and what is happening, why you're deciding whether you should or should not take temperatures. Don't record anything. I will say that was the guidance because we sought legal guidance as well to make sure that we were, abiding by everything, that we could. If people don't want their temperature taken, then they just can't come into that location.
Excellent. Jody, Mike, thank you guys again. Really outstanding, insightful conversation, really touching on many, if not most or all of the things that lenders need to be thinking about as they assess a return to the office. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out again this afternoon.
No problem. Thank you.
Awesome. And to those on the line, thank you for spending some time with us. We'll follow up tomorrow morning and get you a copy of the recording, a copy of the presentation. And I believe we have a policy, like a blanket type of return to work policy that Mr. Metz was nice enough to forward over to us that we could send out once again with the presentation. And we will continue this conversation next Tuesday at the same time with the same discussion leaders. So thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, the sequel.